Two WWE NXT stars have been called up to WWE Raw, and we're going to have some more details on that and what to expect as we get closer to tonight's episode of WWE Raw. Also, AEW Collision, there's a future episode in which there's been a forced change. I'm going to tell you guys why it's not a bad thing at all. And we are going to talk about a WWE legend who has been injured. We know about the injury, but now we got to talk more details behind that injury and some of the changes that may occur currently on WWE programming. All right, guys, let's kick things off with Rey Mysterio. He has undergone surgery today, and there's still very little details on what his actual injury is. We know it's a torn abductor muscle, but we don't know if this is going to keep him out of action for a long time. There's been a lot of talks about Rey Mysterio and what was supposed to be done, but for those who are completely unaware, WWE did have plans to follow through with Rey Mysterio and El Grande Americano for WWE Backlash. And what's actually really interesting here is the fact that Rey Mysterio was replaced by Rey Fenix. We're still waiting to see exactly how WWE follows up with this, if there is any follow-up whatsoever. Now, personally speaking, I think Rey Mysterio, obviously one of the GOATs, one of the best out there. In the last few years, I definitely feel like he's been injury prone, which kind of makes things a little bit more disappointing because you don't want to see guys get hurt. But also, it appears that WWE was utilizing this as a way to segue to an even bigger storyline. So El Grande Americano is part of the story, but there was something bigger planned here. With Rey Mysterio being injured and having a torn abductor muscle and having to undergo surgery for that, the belief is that he's going to be out of television for a little bit. Now, does WWE have Rey Mysterio off of television and then they continue the story because of the LWO? And then obviously American Made and Chad Gable, El Grande Americano? You don't know. Tonight's WWE Raw will be very interesting to pay attention to because we should probably have a little bit more of an idea of what to expect here. But with Rey Mysterio being hurt, it definitely throws a wrench in the plans. Now, does WWE also pivot away from Rey Fenix and El Grande Americano? Or do they go a different direction with El Grande Americano? How long is El Grande Americano going to be actively competing on WWE television? Because the belief was that it was going to be revealed to be Chad Gable at some point, but we didn't get that because Rey Mysterio is currently injured. So that's where things are there. It gets confusing. It gets weird. It's chaotic. It is what it is. You just got to be patient and see how WWE pivots. Let's talk about AEW Collision because they are forced to make another change. They confirmed this change on social media, that letting all of us know, essentially, this upcoming week's episode of Collision will not be on TNT, but in fact, it will be moved to TBS and Max. Now, the reason for this is because Warner Bros. Discovery is going to be airing the Avengers Infinity War movie during Collision's normal time slot. Now, as of right now, AEW has not actually announced anything for Collision for Saturday, but this is a major, major deal because TBS is considered the bigger and better channel, more visibility than TNT. And in addition to that, I think this does a couple things. I think it sets the tone that Warner Bros. Discovery, when it comes to their movies and the properties of certain things that they're going to air on television, will always take a little bit more precedence than AEW. And that's actually a good thing. Like, it's a good thing that AEW is able to have experiments with their time slot and their channel because Warner Bros. Discovery owns so many different channels. They're able to see what works. Now, for example, if AEW Collision airs on TBS, there is a likelihood that maybe it could lead to a permanent change if the viewership is very good. If the viewership is very consistent with TNT and, normal trends, it's probably not going to change. It's the same reason why AEW Collision is also trying out episodes on Thursdays, right? They're doing that because with them possibly having episodes on Thursday, it shows that AEW is able to experiment, but also look at the data and see if a permanent change makes more sense, which for Warner Bros. Discovery, I do think ultimately, and I've been saying this for a while now, but I do think ultimately they can move it to Thursdays live, and then On Saturdays at 8 p.m., that reserves a time slot for them to air whatever movie they want to air, and then they don't have to worry about AEW competing with, basketball. They don't have to worry about AEW competing with WWE or UFC pay-per-views, and eventually it just makes a lot of sense for them to completely shift away from Saturday nights. I don't think it's helpful to AEW being on Saturday nights. It sounds like they're receptive to the idea, but they're only going to make this decision based on the data. So we'll see what happens. The fact that Collision might not be on TNT sometimes, it might be on TBS. Hell, it might even be on True TV. Some people look at that as a weakness, but I look at that flexibility as like a good thing because of the fact that, yes, it could be confusing at times, but you can kind of see all these different points of data to know whether or not it is working, not working, whatever it may be. And that's the key point. They're going to make decisions, hopefully, based on the data. And that brings us to our final topic. Ladies and gentlemen, Julia and Roxanne Perez have been called up to the main roster. So this comes from a new report coming from PW Insider, and they have said that they are working on definitively confirming the call-ups. However, there is evidence that Roxanne and Julia were wearing debut patches that strongly indicate both are now part of the WWE Raw brand. Now, obviously, we know Roxanne Perez will be on Raw tonight against Rhea Ripley. You have to wonder if Julia is going to be involved there. But basically, for those who don't know, last week's episode, they were wearing patches for their Raw debut. And so the way that this works is like a company like Topps, for example. You know how they have like these trading card sets? Now they're starting to include these patches. So basically, it's like a one-of-one type of thing. It creates a lot of interest and whatnot, and it makes a lot of sense. So I don't think WWE would have, had them actually make their call up and then send them back down to NXT. Let me also say this. Julia and Roxanne are both incredibly talented. Having them in the mix with Rhea Ripley is cool. Having them in the mix with Liv Morgan, Bianca Belair, some of these other women, great. There's a new crop of women talent who are taking over, and you got to slowly but correctly introduce them. So Julia, Roxanne, having segments or matches with some of these top stars who have been on the main roster for a long time, and then being able to do something that is considered successful, I think long-term will have great results. So that's what it really comes down to. I think some people were kind of shocked to see that Julia not immediately, but she spent very little time in NXT and now she's being called up. I think that's a great thing. I'm not going to complain about it. And I think for Roxanne, we've kind of been waiting to see what they do. Now the question is, does Roxanne and Bayley get revisited? Because that's another thing that you don't want to see dropped. But who knows? Great call-ups. Glad to see that it seems to be official. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below.